We're back in Fairhaven, only this time Paris has brought a car, probably just so he can crash it, like everything else he's ever driven. Some Googling suggests it's an Oldsmobile curved dash, though I'm not willing to put in the time to identify the specific model. Either way, that makes the current date somewhere from 1901 onwards, though that's assuming Paris hasn't stuck it in for the giggles, like he did with those Guinness posters from the 40s. If it's from the wrong time, then it's not so far out that the locals are shocked by it existing. Ne'er-do-well stereotype comes over to assist a now-crashed Paris, though his altruism is partly an excuse to try and get some money to go drinking. I guess the questionable approach to Irish representation is one of the things Paris managed to save from the original programme. Paris pays him off, but declines to join him at the pub. As Ne'er-do-well walks away, he hears Paris order the computer to replace his tyre, something that shouldn't be possible for holodeck characters. They're supposed to be programmed to ignore anything that isn't within the sphere of the simulation, because a hologram of a bumpkin believing you can perform witchcraft might get in the way of the setting. Which is precisely what's happening here. Ne'er-do-well is at the pub and telling anybody who'll listen that Paris is a sorcerer who used magic to repair his car. The crowd are mostly disbelieving, not least of which the barman, Mr. Punter, so named in a previous episode. Of course, he has his own reason for defending the newest additions to the town, and the reason arrives to order some tea. I guess Janeway got over her hesitance to see him again after the last time. Fairhaven is proving as popular as it did previously. In fact, we're back to an open-door policy on the holodeck from the sounds of things, and B'Elanna is concerned about the maintenance demands of running it constantly. Granted, that may have more to do with Paris becoming obsessed by it again and ignoring her. So obsessed, in fact, that he wants to have a little fun with it, even at the expense of others. Kim is trying to date a hologram, perhaps having taken the inspiration from Janeway. His moment of passion is somewhat dented by Paris turning her into a cow. Funny to them, perhaps, but not to Ne'er-do-well and his fellow pub patron, Darth Sidious, who've been following him and have just witnessed this latest example of dark magic from Paris. Leaving her that way when they're called to the bridge certainly doesn't help matters either. As we're dealing with nebulous spirits originally fabricated to control people through superstition and fear, who better to ask for help than the local priest? Thankfully, the local priest is none other than the Doctor, revelling in his chance to be the centre of attention. Ne'er-do-well and his companion, the Dark Lord of the Sith, explain what they saw, how Paris used otherworldly instruments to change a girl into the cow they've brought. The Doc's quick thinking covers for Paris, and he says he saw the girl in question at her flower cart on the way to the church. Then he throws everybody out, except for the cow, which he tells them to leave. If anybody thinks this is a curious request, they have the good grace not to mention it. The Doc's able to restore the girl just before they get to where he said he saw her, but our Irish Holmes and Watson aren't convinced and ask her questions when she says she feels a bit weird. Such an odd thing, though. She says she had the most curious dream about wearing no clothes save for a bell around her neck and being led to the church. Either she's got memories of what Paris did, or the Doc has developed some pretty fucking weird kinks. The rumour has taken full root now, and they're all grouped in the pub, sharing stories about how the newcomers have been doing some proper weird shit. Controlling weather, repairing cars, vanishing into thin air. There's only one explanation. They're magical spirit folk. I mean, okay, save for the cow business, they've not actually done anything bad. In fact, the bartender's love interest saved a kid from a well, then pretended nothing had happened. It might not be objectively bad, but it is different, and if there's one thing we know about humans, it's that different means pitchforks and torches. Mr. Punter speaks up in their defence, but even he sees that there are some curious things about the newest additions to Fairhaven, and it's a conversation he has with Janeway later on that evening. He knows she's been keeping things from him and outright lying in places. In fact, he's even checked on her background, and nobody from where she claims to have originated has ever heard of her. Janeway seems to debate the idea of being honest with him, before instead closing down the whole programme. She wants to know what's gone wrong, why Fairhaven's inhabitants have started seeing things they shouldn't. The answer is partly because Paris was fucking about with it, and partly because it's been running constantly. Kim says it's the first time we've ran a simulation for an extended period, which isn't strictly true if you remember the Killing Game in Season 4, but that used mind-controlled crew as the main characters and neatly sidesteps the degradation issue as a result. Anywho, we need to fix it all if we're going to carry on visiting Fairhaven for recreation, and that means repairing the characters, which is why Paris and Kim boot up Mr. Punter to take a look. A slight problem, he's not in standby mode and instead wants to know what the fuck is going on, a not unreasonable request under the circumstances. Paris tries to calm him while Kim pokes around in his program. He says he's fixed it and Mr. Punter starts acting more calmly, but I note there was no flicker or reinitialization like we often see with alterations. They'll need to do the same to all the other characters, and Kim says they can do it all in one go from a panel inside the pub. Why can they access commands on the holodeck that they can't access from a lab specifically designed to control holodeck things? Because reasons. The main one, of course, being so that an unaltered Mr. Punter can go and tell the townsfolk about his otherworldly story, and Paris and Kim's plans to change Fairhaven. At least Paris and Kim now know that he was faking. They checked Mr. Punter's systems after sending him back, and saw that it was unchanged. On the plus side, that means they also know that he overheard their plans to visit the pub on the holodeck and realised they should find another way. Just kidding, they're off to do it anyway. As they're breaking into the pub, Mr. Punter's story has resulted in the gathering of a crowd. The pitchforks have been replaced by guns, but the reaction is the same in principle. Ne'er-do-well's appointed himself as leader of the mob and riles them up, perhaps not realising this will mean he gets no more drinking money from Paris. A scout arrives to tell them Paris and Kim are in the pub, and off the mob goes to do some mischief. They open with using a net at least, saving the gun for when Ne'er-do-well spots the console Paris and Kim were using. Both barrels from a shotgun result in the most predictable of outcomes, disabling the safety protocols. We could ask why those safety protocols weren't set up to protect the hardware, I guess, but by this point, I think we should treat the failsafes being utter dogshit as established canon. The shotgun has also asked up control of the simulation, meaning Paris's attempt to pause the program only works on a little over half of the people there. It's enough to scarper, but there wasn't much point as the exit is buggered too. The mob catches up with them before dragging them away. Events on the holodeck are at least known to the others, so we're in the briefing room trying to think of a solution. B'Elanna wants to pull the plug and Seven suggests an armed assault, but Janeway wants a more peaceful solution. We can't teleport Paris and Kim out because science reasons, but if someone could get gizmos on them, we could counter-science the science. The doc volunteers, by which I mean Janeway looks at him in a way that tells him he should volunteer if he doesn't want to get too vexed. At least Seven says his mobile emitter should make him immune to the errors on the holodeck, the mention of which all but guarantees this plan is going to go down the shitter. We're in the church with our little mob trying to banish Paris and Kim. The doc arrives with shouting and judgment and calling them all a bunch of sinful dickheads, which is a brave choice considering how they all know him as the guy who wanted to be left alone with a cow. But they also know him as the guy who disappeared into thin air, accusations not helped by the fact that he's brought magical talismans with him and is even wearing one. Ripping it off transfers his program to the holodeck, scuppering attempts by Janeway to teleport him out. It also means he's open to the same program errors that the others are encountering, a fact that means Ne'er-do-well's attempts to hypnotize him are significantly more successful than they should have been. He tells them about Voyager before Mr. Punter takes over. Asking's all well and good, but going over there himself would be better, and the doc tells him how. Up on the bridge, Tuvok detects the mobile emitter coming back online. They teleport it out, the problem which prevents them teleporting Paris and Kim apparently not applying to the mobile emitter. Instead of the doc, they get a holographic Irish barman. He's a little calmer than the last time he was out of the holodeck, and, left with very little reason not to be honest, Janeway decides to give him the tour. She explains that they're explorers who enjoy visiting Fairhaven, but stops short of explaining just what Fairhaven is, and its inhabitants by extension. To him, we're people from space who travel back through time to visit them. He adapts to the news pretty well, a sharp contrast to his fellow townsfolk who are currently preparing to burn Paris, Kim and the doc on bonfires. Janeway to the rescue then, and she arrives at the church before they can drag their victims to the kindling. Some explaining manages to smooth things over a bit, and Mr. Punter pointing out that most of the things we've done here were positive doesn't hurt either. Sorry about the cow business, won't happen again, probably. Janeway offers for us all to leave and never return if that's what the people of Fairhaven want, and another speech from Mr. Punter seems to convince them that maybe we're not monsters after all. It's not going to be the same though. Running Fairhaven constantly has proven to be unviable, so it'll have to be accessed like any other program, but Janeway thinks we should leave them as they are, rather than delete their knowledge of us. Not that it seems to matter to the inhabitants of Fairhaven now. Ne'er-do-well still sees Paris as a payday, though he's setting his sights on pots of gold now, just to complete the stereotype. Kim's love interest has forgiven him about the whole being a cow thing too, and Mr. Punter is still trading book recommendations with Janeway. We leave them to figure out what name Janeway prefers to be addressed by as we fly away. It makes sense that holodeck characters should be oblivious to the things which would ruin immersion. On the surface, that might sound like it would in itself ruin immersion, but it's really no different to how things are in video games currently. When you run over a health pack in a game, it doesn't result in the characters around you being shocked by the sudden disappearance of your wounds. We make concessions to realism for the purpose of entertainment. At least the developers who remember that games are supposed to be fun do, anyway. The point is that the term "that's not realistic" is often anathema to entertainment, and I realise the irony of me being the one to say that, given my regular digressions. The difference is that I try to limit my observations to the bits that are wrong for no discernible gain. For example, the holodeck generators being given fuel to run indefinitely on a ship with constant resource concerns might not be realistic, but it's a concession we're willing to make here for the story opportunities provided by self-aware characters. Anyway, the idea of characters breaking that barrier of being able to see the concessions is one worth exploring. It's not the first time holodeck characters have become self-aware, of course. If memory serves, that happened with a certain Professor Moriarty over on the Enterprise. But whereas he became enamored with the world beyond his simulation, here we have characters trying to understand us through the lens of their environment rather than adapt themselves to ours. The episode also manages to serve as a good reminder of why Starfleet's pre-warp non-contact provision exists. For every well-read bartender, there are 20 members of the Pitchfork and Torches Club and someone willing to lead them. Staying out of things until more of them are ready to understand is as much for our benefit as theirs. One point of interest here is seeing how the crew of Voyager have chosen to interact with the simulation and what that tells us about their characters. For Janeway, it's a chance to just be normal and drink tea with someone who doesn't call her captain. For Kim, it's partly the same, but with a bit more wanting to be noticed, be it for arm wrestling or by a pretty girl. Paris gets the chance to be a playboy and have all the toys he wants, and also gets opportunities to be a dick while calling them jokes. The Doc revels in being the centre of attention and occupying a position of reverence and importance. They each reflect the inner desires we've seen either hinted at or outright stated elsewhere. The odd one out, then, is Neelix, who does much the same as he already does on Voyager, acting as a cook at the Ox and Lamb, and we'll finish with a little look at the implications of that. What this suggests about him, that he finds value in making others happy for his own entertainment, gives a hint of the high esteem in which he holds his position on Voyager. In an environment limited only by his imagination, he literally would rather do nothing else. For all the times I've complained about the character being annoyingly written, I confess I found that unexpectedly heartwarming. End of episode.
Right then, killing Paris. No holodeck, no airlock, no shuttles. Engineering won't work cause of B'Elanna, and the bridge don't kill important people.
That doesn't leave much.
Hold on, what if we're going about this the wrong way?
What do you mean?
Well, we're trying to organise a thing to happen to him. What if we got him to do something that'll make others want to kill him? Treason or some shite.
Won't work. The Federation doesn't have the death penalty.
Oh, do they not? I'll just go tell that to Tuvix.
Fair point. So who'd kill him?
B'Elanna, if pushed far enough. Same for Tuvok. And we already know Janeway's willing to fuck up anyone who looks at her wrong. Maybe Neelix too, he'd have probably done it for Kez.
I reckon Janeway's probably the easiest. What if we deleted the replicator pattern for coffee, and say Paris did it?
Jesus Christ, no. Janeway with no coffee? Half the crew would be dead within 3 months. Woof.